Oh, and then I came in too quickly and forgot to put in to do the magical intro. And here we go. Good morning, America. It's Thursday, February 20th, 2025. I'm Ted Rall, and my guest co-host today is none other than producer Robby West. Manila Chan is, as far as we know, as fit as a fiddle, but she is attending the CPAC conference in Washington, D.C., the Conservative Political Action Committee, and she may or may not chime in. It's going to be, anybody's guess whether she's able to get a signal, and maybe she'll even be able to buttonhole some conservative or Republican guest to join us. So we'll see what happens there. But Robby and I are flying. We're assuming we're flying without Manila, and if Manila comes in, that's great. And she should be back tomorrow. So anyway, you are tuned into the Ted Manila Information Show. TMI for short, too much information, and of course, Ted and Manila information. The information stays constant. The I is always the same thing. Anyway, we cover everything: news, politics, sports. Okay, we don't cover sports. The weather, culture.
Hey, we can.
We can. There's no stopping it. I would be very bad at it, but whatever. Anyway, everything that you can think of, anything and everything goes. We think you can never have too much information. So if you need that straight-laced button-down news program, as Manila likes to say, well, this show will supplement that, but it will not replace that. So you can go ahead and seek that out, but hopefully you'll stick around here as well. We try to get you stuff you want to hear about, maybe some stuff you never knew you wanted to hear about, and hopefully laugh along the way. We're here every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 7 a.m. Pacific, and you can probably figure out the rest. 11 a.m. Atlantic time. No one ever remembers Atlantic, the maritime provinces of Canada, but we love you guys. Be sure to like and follow the show. This is the Ted Manila Information Show, and it starts right now. Today, we're going to be talking about Trump's plan, and it's not just something he's floating on Truth Social. He has issued an executive order to the effect that he wants to slash Pentagon spending by 8% a year over the next 5 years. As someone in the Rumble chat said, that is not something that we would have expected on our Trump bingo card, right?
I did not expect that, no.
No. So let's go ahead and joining us at the bottom of the hour, we're going to have a friend of the show who we haven't talked to for way too long, Dan Kovalik, the human rights lawyer. He's going to help us break down the proposal. And our last headline is going to detail the proposal. And, I have a feeling this is one of those things where the devil is in the details. So we're going to bring you those details so we can figure out exactly what's happening. But look, make no mistake, that's radical. I mean, even Bernie Sanders, as far as I know, he's proposed the biggest defense budget cuts of anyone who's currently holds a major political office in Washington. And the most he's ever offered suggested was to cut defense spending by 10%. Now, as Robby knows, if he's gotten to that point in my book, my next book proposes a 95% budget cut in the Pentagon. But I don't hold any political office. I'm just a cartoonist, so it doesn't count as much. This is a really, really big deal. All right, so I don't hold the jaws, so we're going to assume the jaws like.
No, we got to be respectful of your Asian co-host. We can't just go around and steal her intellectual property.
Yes, the jaws have long been part of Laotian Asian culture, as is well known. The Laotian caiman makes that sound when it opens its jaws. It goes.
Does that happen? Do the caiman? Do they do that whenever they blow those big horns that you and Manila were talking about a couple weeks ago?
Oh yeah, I don't know if the Laotians actually have that horn. That's a Tibetan thing. I forget what that's called, but it's like that.
Oh. Yeah, Manila said they had something similar, but she wasn't sure if they were made out of bamboo or not.
And I didn't get a sense of whether it was big or not. The one, I mean, the Tibetan one, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's I don't know, 15 feet long. I mean, they say it's not the size of your giant musical instrument, it's how you use it. But either way, it's the size. And I mean, you can hear that thing across a valley. It's like insane. It's
I'm going to be a little bit racially insensitive. I mean, it seems like a lot of people from that part of the world are kind of small. So if you have so the size of the horn is kind of depends on the angle from which you're viewing it at. So
that's true. They are small people. Although, the Tibetans are ferocious. I mean,
I was talking about the Laotians.
Well, the Laotians, I think they actually have a Southeast Asia. That's where where kickboxing comes from.
Yep.
And it's more ferocious there than it is here. I mean, like,
I believe it.
Right. I mean, like, routinely. And you're just like, it's so weird. Thailand's one of the few countries in the world that historically has never been successfully invaded or occupied. And it's kind of like, we don't go looking for any fights. We don't invade anyone. But if you come here, we are going to killify you 6 ways till Sunday. And then we'll go back to our peaceful Buddhist lives with the occasional kickboxing. So it's very strange. Anyway,
hey, we'll take it.
All right, let's go ahead. Let's get into the headlines. There's a type of particle called the Majorana fermion that was hypothesized in 1937. I always wonder how they hypothesize particles. Like, are they just smoking weed and then it just... Anyway, hell, dude, I bet there's a fermion. Like, it's awesome. Anyway, the Majorana fermion has some unique properties, and it's long been theorized that Majorana particles could be useful for quantum computing. Well, in a surprise announcement yesterday, Microsoft unveiled a quantum computing chip, Majorana 1, that successfully harnesses a small number of exotic Majorana particles to encode quantum information. Microsoft started going down this road nearly 20 years ago, and now it looks like there's a significant quantum computing breakthrough. The Majorana 1 chip contains 8 qubits, or quantum bits, far fewer than top-tier quantum computers currently in operation. However, Microsoft sees a path to scale up the number to 1 million qubits. At that scale, quantum computing would likely become useful for solving real-world problems. One of the major roadblocks preventing quantum computers from scaling is error correction. Qubits are fragile and can be compromised by various environmental factors. This introduces errors, which can derail a computation before it gets completed. A future quantum computer capable of useful calculations will need a way to correct these errors. A benefit of the Majorana particles that Microsoft has harnessed is that they tend to be more stable and less susceptible to errors than other approaches to quantum computing, but there still have been mistakes, and that's going to need to be overcome in order to scale up the chip to that desirable 1 million qubits. I don't pretend to, even though I did get thrown out of a very good engineering school as a physics major, I do not pretend to understand all this. But the main takeaway is that we knew that microchips had been doubling in capacity, over the years, and obviously nothing can grow forever, including, say, the U.S. economy. And so at a certain point, the question was, will things continue? Will the capacity of computers to process continue to grow, or will they plateau to a certain level? And, that would introduce all sorts of limitations. But quantum computing kind of solves that problem, because basically it's spooky particles that they don't even just move fast. They kind of appear to be in two places or more at the same time. And that's the thing that's super interesting about them.
Yeah, it's interesting. And one of the things I'm really thinking about is, in the future, how will that influence artificial intelligence? Because if once you get that problem solving thing figured out, in 20, 30 years, would that be a viable solution to, say, the air traffic control problem that we obviously have here in the United States, of planes running into each other and falling out of the sky and helicopters playing chicken with jets? So
yeah, I mean, if you think about that accident that happened in Washington at Reagan, I mean, what did that basically boil down to? Well, they were like, we were short-staffed. But let's face it, it was basically one person can't talk to two people quickly enough when things are moving quickly in a way that two or more air traffic controllers could have talked to each other. Right. But if it wasn't a person, if it was a machine that was communicating, that would have been able to occur a lot faster. So it does seem like that's the kind of problem that that a tech solution could address.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it sounds like, if you listen to the black box, for example, it sounds like that the helicopter pilot and was looking at the wrong jet, and they had that the pilot was looking at the wrong jet. Thought I was far enough away from what air traffic control was warning me about, and I didn't look up. So, that would be some things that could just really be resolved in this kind of issue.
Yeah, no, totally. Like that helicopter thing where it's like, oh, I see the plane. Well, it's kind of like, and now we're not sure. And obviously the helicopter, pilot is dead. So we can't ask her, well, which plane were you looking at? I mean, right. It's a problem. Yep. Anyway, it's interesting. Anyway, let's move on. The U.S. is calling Russia the aggressor in a G7 statement on the 3rd anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, threatening to derail the annual traditional show of unity about the Ukrainian conflict. That, according to Western officials familiar with the issue. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's participation at a virtual G7 summit on this coming Monday also hasn't yet been agreed to. The disagreement comes after Trump blamed Ukraine for the war, described Zelensky as a dictator without elections, and suggested that Russia should be invited back into the G7. These remarks, by the way, of Trump's are driving mainstream media completely insane. And they're like, it's false that he's a dictator. It's like, okay, he's not a dictator. He just doesn't allow any opposition parties. He has absolute rule. He doesn't allow opposition media, and he's not subject to re-election. But otherwise, he's not a dictator.
And he controls the media.
And he controls the media, absolutely. All the former opposition TV networks are now running in real time exactly the same content as state media that supports him. So, it's like, I guess the question is, what is a dictator? I'd look at that guy and I'd be like, there be a dictator.
I don't know. I think it's just probably more just a streamlined democracy, Ted. I mean, if you think about it, it's very efficient. It's not as chaotic as our republic is. And that's one of the things that really pisses me off about American media is, we're not a democracy. We're a republic. Let's at least use the right term. And I mean, say what you will. You don't have those messy protests. You don't have the debt ceiling, no conversations, especially since you just borrow all of your money. And their democracy is very clean. It's very suave. It's very sophisticated. I think it's a good model that probably a President Harris might have liked to have adopted, or maybe
perhaps, or President Trump. I mean, it's like, and they don't have that polarization. It's kind of like, it's like, oh, so who do you like? Do you like President Zelensky, or do you like President Zelensky? It's like, it reminds me of one time eating at the first restaurant that reopened in Afghanistan, in the town that I was in after the U.S. invasion. It had been the Mullah Omar, and they renamed it to the Shah Massoud. And the waiter comes over and speaks English, and he comes over and he's like, so what would you like to eat? And of course, bear in mind, I had not had solid food in 14 days. So at this point, really, like,
anything
dog is fine. But anyway, so I'm like, I'd lost 42 pounds. I'm like, okay. So he goes, so the guy, the waiter's has a guy translating for him. And so he's like, so what would you like to eat? And I go, well, what do you have? He goes, well, what would you like to eat? And I'm thinking, well, I would love like a steak au poivre with a nice, like, vinegar, salad, fresh salad with a vinaigrette. But what do you have? And he's like, would you like kebab? And I'm like, do you have anything other than kebab? And he's like, we have kebab. And I'm like, I think I'd like the kebab. And he's like, good choice.
There you go.
It was like the cheeseburger thing, but in Afghanistan. We had a similar conversation about tea. What would you like to drink? It's like, basically, there was tea and nothing else. So if you want to drink, tea's the drink to have when you're in the mood to drink something, because it's tea. Anyway.
Gotcha.
Okay. So, all right. So, okay. Yeah. All right. The U.S. envoys objected to the phrase Russian aggression and similar descriptions that have been used by the G7 to describe the conflict. The world's leading economies have traditionally issued a statement every February 24th. That's the day that the war began, of course. The U.S. Embassy in Kyiv declined to comment. Russia's aggression, however, was mentioned 5 times in the G7 statement last year. Aggression, 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 aggression. All right. Well, maybe
listen,
there, I just did it. We're all taken care of.
Russia threw the first punch, but there's a reason why that they threw the first punch. I mean, anyone that has a functioning brain cell will know that they will not, no nation, it doesn't matter if it's China, doesn't matter if it's Russia, the United States, looking at you, Cuba, would allow a foreign military to come up on your border to be able to attack you with you not having any chance of responding to that aggression. I mean,
that's true. I mean, what Trump was, what Putin was worried about, obviously it's like if under Article 5, right, an attack on one country is an attack on all. And like, so you get a border conflict between Ukraine and Russia, which they've had border conflicts. I mean, they had border conflict over Crimea that predated 2014, right? And it's like it's like you have two border guards start shooting at each other, and that means by definition, Emmanuel Macron has to talk to his nuclear team and decide whether or not to fire ICBMs at Moscow. That, understandably, is not something that Putin thought would be very agreeable.
No.
And so I think it's fair to say what's accurate is Russia started the war and Ukraine provoked it. And you can say, I mean, that's what happened. I mean,
there is a such thing as preemptive self-defense. You don't have to wait to get punched in the face in international law before you take action. I mean, you have the right to defend yourself.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can totally argue that Russia should not have done this, but I think here's the thing: it's not realistic, and no major power, any country that had the ability to make an invasion like this and possibly win would have, I think, under the same circumstances.
Well, all I can say is that the United States and NATO are very lucky that there was not a President Westonov in Moscow, or I would not have stopped till I reached the Polish border. I mean, Russia is much more restrained than what I would have been. Just saying.
Oh, they were no. They. It's funny. They're like, oh well, they didn't. They really wanted to overthrow Zelensky. I think they wanted to overthrow Zelensky if it was easy, and it's like, but it's like they basically anything beyond like, we really need that buffer zone. We need the Donbass. We need Crimea. That's it. All right. The odds that a recently discovered asteroid will strike the Earth on December 22nd, 2032 have now risen to 3.1%, NASA said on Tuesday. That's the highest possible probability for an impact by such a huge space rock in modern forecasting. But don't panic, says Richard Moisi, head of the European Space Agency's Planetary Defense Office. As astronomers gather more data, odds of a direct hit are widely expected to edge up before then rapidly dropping down to zero. However, in the unlikely event that the probability does keep rising up to 100%, he says we're not defenseless. Here is the main way that humanity could save itself. Only one planetary defense strategy has actually been tried out on an actual asteroid, which is smashing a spaceship into it. In 2022, NASA's Double Asteroid Redirection Test, acronym DART, deliberately smashed a spacecraft into the 160-meter wide Dimorphos asteroid, successfully altering its orbit around a larger space rock. An advantage of this plan is that we could strike the 2024 YR4 asteroid with multiple spacecrafts, observing how each one changes its trajectory. Bruce Betts, chief scientist for the nonprofit Planetary Society, says the asteroid discovered in December is between 40 and 90 meters wide, roughly half the size of Dimorphos. You have to take care not to overdo it, however. If the spacecraft partially destroys the asteroid, it could send bits flying off that could still head toward Earth. If this happened, the eventual impact site on Earth could be anywhere between Paris to Moscow, and that would cause some major problems back here on Earth. This is a little terrifying, I will say.
Yeah, well, the thing I'm most concerned about is, well, let me rephrase. I'm glad that we have another plan now that Bruce Willis is unable to save us.
Exactly.
So I am glad now that we do have other options. I don't think Chuck Norris could handle an asteroid, maybe, but I don't think he probably could. And it's weird just when you start realizing just how big the universe is and how small we are and how fragile our planet is and how hell-bent we are on wrecking the world, which probably sounds kind of weird coming from a right-winger, but there it is.
All right, so let's keep going. Nearly 1 out of 10 adults in the United States identifies as LGBTQ. 1 out of 10, according to a new analysis by Gallup. Almost triple the share since Gallup began counting in 2012. That's up by 2/3 since 2020. The increases have been mainly driven by young people, no surprise there, and by bisexual women. Nearly a quarter of adults in Generation Z, defined by Gallup as those aged 18 to 27, identify as LGBTQ, according to the analysis. This includes 14,000 adults across all of Gallup's phone surveys last year. More than half of LGBT young adults identify as bisexual. Among all the respondents, 1.3% say that they're transgender. That's up 0.6% in 2020. That's higher than other large surveys have found in recent years. Members of Gen Z were also more likely to be transgender. 4.1% were, compared with 1.7% of millennials, and less than 1% in each older generation. That's Gen X, like me, or baby boomer, older than me. Various groups have tried to count this population, and Gallup's survey is considered one of the most complete. Respondents were asked if they considered themselves straight or heterosexual, lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, and could choose more than one identity or volunteer another. About 86% of respondents said that they were straight, according to Gallup. So,
why do you think that is? I mean,
well,
do you have a theory?
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where there's multiple explanations, right? I don't think there's one. First of all, there's people who would previously have been closeted, who feel more comfortable because of the change in the culture in self-identifying. It's kind of like they were, let's say, whatever, they were bi, but they didn't want anyone to know, and they might have been reluctant to tell a pollster in the past, and now they're like, okay, it's okay to tell. That's some people. Also, there is obviously a cultural influence. Trans is all over the news. There's just in today's newspaper, there was an article about a woman she is a woman now. She transitioned to be a man in Israel, who basically decided to detransition after October 7th because she thought it was a luxury form of activism, as she put it, in a time of war. And also, I think a lot of people who would normally be straight, sort of started thinking, oh, maybe I'm trans, really. So she said, for example, that now she's a lesbian, or she was a lesbian, but then she thought, maybe I'm really a boy who is a straight boy because I'm attracted to women. So I think there's that. Also, I mean, look, it's younger people, right? So what does that tell you? I mean, I don't think sexual orientation inherently changes that radically between, say, baby boomers and Gen Z. American human beings are still American human beings. We haven't changed genetically in a matter of, say, 40 years, right? So obviously culture has a lot to do with it. And, and it's cool in certain milieus, particularly in like liberal colleges and so on, in liberal towns, to be trans or to be gay. And so people, I think, are more experimental. They're more open to it. People who might not have ever tried it are more willing to try it. I mean, I had a roommate who, he just had girl problems, right? And I mean, I know the feeling. And then like what happened is he hung out with a lot of gay dudes, and they were like, your reason you're having girl problems is because you shouldn't be with girls. You should be rolling gay style. So they're like, you should come down to Miami Beach with us, and you'll see, like, really explore. You'll see that you're really gay. So I argued against this. I was like, that's ridiculous. You're straight. It's so stupid. And but anyway, he was an adult, he was 28 years old. He goes down to Miami Beach, comes back a week later, and I'm like, I'm a guy, so I don't like lay it on thick, like, tell me what happened. But I'm like, I'm like, so how'd it go? And he's like, I'm not gay and I don't want to talk about it beyond that. I'm like, okay, it's cool.
Yeah.
We don't have to ever talk about it again. But obviously, he must have tried something, I'm assuming. And it's like sort of like that's peer pressure, right? I mean,
Sure.
it sound I think there's a lot. So I think it's part of it is a more relaxed environment coupled with, I think, and there's probably other stuff going on as well. And who knows? I mean, there might even be environmental reasons. Who knows? What do you think?
I got to be careful because I do have opinions on this, and we are on YouTube, so I have to be mindful of that.
Mm-hmm.
What I think personally, I think a big part of it is a recruitment drive that is aimed at young people. 100%. It's all over the media. It's every movie that you go to now. Has the gay person. Everyone has the gay friend. You have a lot of the sitcoms and stuff, and it's all, look at the target audience. I mean, it's that way from Disney all the way on up now, and that's in my heart of hearts. That's what it is, and this problem is not just it's just not in the liberal colleges. Like here in little Podunk, Montana, of when we had open house. When my daughter started high school, there were big old signs holding here in Montana saying, "Don't assume, ask your pronouns." And went to this one classroom with the rainbow flag and said, "You got to read this book." And I told the teacher, I said, "My daughter will not read this book. This will not happen." And so to me, that's what it seems like. It is a recruitment drive.
I mean, yeah. What's the term? Social contagion. I mean, I think that's definitely. Look, I'm not going to say it's the whole thing, but it's definitely not. It's definitely a factor.
I mean, how else could you explain just the increase in the numbers? We have my daughter was talking about a kid that goes to their high school that now identifies as a cat and insists on having a litter pan. I mean,
the one in Australia.
No, here.
Oh, there was an Australian girl also in like high school who she was I guess felatrans or trans feline, and she identified as a cat, and they gave her a litter box in the room.
Yeah,
and by the way, I'm like, does she drop trowel and like scratch and go and make those mystery sounds?
I mean, to me, that just blows my mind. And like I said, I got to be careful about what I'm saying because I got to be conscious of the YouTube community guidelines and stuff. But when Joe Biden, when he pushed through saying that gender dysphoria was a recognized disability, is it a disability or is it a lifestyle? I mean, is it something to be accepted or is it an illness that needs to be treated? It can't be both at the same time. And that's the part I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, look, I as we talked about yesterday, I'm a big libertarian dude in that sense. I think people should be able to do whatever the hell they want to do.
I agree.
God bless them, and I don't really care. And like, they should be defended no matter what. So I don't know if I necessarily view it as a problem. I do think it's super interesting. I mean, when I used to work for a Japanese bank, and at that time, and I think this is still true. I mean, the number of people in Japan who identified as LGBTQ was like infinitesimal. And basically it was just like being gay is kind of like not really allowed in Japan. And it's sort of like, well, so how many people are repressed? Obviously there's a significant percentage of the population who are repressed. That's bad. And, then there's the whole, lesbian until graduation phenomenon in college. I don't know. It's just, everybody do you. I don't know if I can get behind trans feline.
I mean, the way I see it, what you do in your house, I don't care. It's not my problem. But when you start marketing to kids, when you start going after the youth, who, by definition, the age of consent exists for a reason. Leave the kids alone. That's where I'll fight you.
Let's move on. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered senior military and Defense Department officials to draw up plans to slash 8% from the defense budget over each of the next 5 years, officials said on Wednesday. Ms. Hegseth said in a memo issued yesterday that a number of branches inside the military and the Pentagon should turn in budget-cutting proposals by Monday. The memo lists 17 exceptions to the cuts, including military operations at the southern border, however. One senior official says the cuts appear likely to be part of an effort to focus Pentagon money on programs that the Trump administration likes, as opposed to actually cutting the $850 billion annual budget. And that's not even counting almost that same exact amount that we also spend on interest on previous wars and all that. For example, the Pentagon is already spending more money on the Trump administration's efforts at the southern border, including on military flights that have taken migrants in the U.S. to countries as far away as India, not to mention Guantanamo. Hegseth has vowed to use thousands of active duty military troops to help stem migrants across the border, but illegal crossings had already started to slow down before Trump took office last month. In a statement issued yesterday, Robert Salisis, acting deputy defense secretary, said the president's change to the department is clear: achieve peace through strength. He added that the Pentagon was undertaking the budget cuts with the aim of bolstering other priorities. We are guided by Trump's priorities, including securing the borders, building the Iron Dome for America, and ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing. Any cuts to the defense budget may face opposition in Congress, where lawmakers, of course, focus on budget cuts that might affect their districts. The Pentagon is also bracing for proposed cuts to its workforce and has been asked to hand over to the Trump administration lists of probationary employees who could be laid off. A senior military official said that Musk's Doge has expressed interest in moving full-time Pentagon employees to contract positions so that they would be easier to fire. Joining us to talk about this, assuming that you've just heard the Jaws sound effect, which I don't have because Manila has that, is Dan Kovalik. Dan Kovalik is an American human rights and labor lawyer and peace activist. Dan, thanks so much for joining us here.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Hey,
pleasure to meet you.
Too long.
Good to meet you too.
That's Robby West there. So Dan, what are we to make of all this? I mean, I got to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but the biggest proposed cut in defense spending I've ever heard of was Bernie Sanders has proposed up to 10% cut overall. I crunched the numbers on this. If you were to simply cut the Pentagon budget by 8% a year for the next 5 years, that's an overall cut of 35% less than where we are now. But then we're hearing this conflicted, kind of news from the New York Times that, well, what this is really about is cutting the budget so that then they can redirect or spend more money on stuff like this Iron Dome thing, which I have never heard Trump talk about up until now. But we know what Iron Dome is from, they have it in Israel. So that, and then more troops at the U.S. border. Although I don't know how expensive could guarding the U.S. border really be compared to that massive Pentagon. I mean, Pentagon spending is by far and away the biggest thing. So, I mean, whenever Republicans talked about fiscal responsibility, I've always thought they always studiously leave the defense budget out of it. Democrats do too, usually. It's usually sacrosanct. It's the one thing, the NDAA, which is the military budget, is always something that passes with bipartisan support. In fact, both parties routinely give the Pentagon more money than they ask for in their budget. They're like, hey, we'd like X amount. Hey, we'll tip you, guys. We love you. Have more. So, this does seem like it's a radical turn, even if the details are yet to be worked out.
Well, I agree. He's also talking about, meeting with Russia and China and trying to agree on 50% cuts, in military spending. I mean, hey, I have to support this. I mean, I think it should be slashed by a lot more, but hey, this is a great start.
Agreed.
I think we need to spend money on the well-being of our citizens, spend more money on social programs, less on the military, and it's usually the opposite of that. As you say, the Congress is always willing to give the military more than they want while starving social programs, and it should be the opposite of that. Also, the Defense Department is probably the most wasteful of all the departments. They fail all these audits. I think they couldn't even account for $21 trillion or some crazy figure like that. There's always those famous stories of, the Defense Department buying a hammer for $100 and stuff. So the Defense Department is the place to start if you want to cut spending.
That's where the money is.
That's where the money is. And so I wholeheartedly support it. We'll see how Democrats respond. I do find that, the Democratic base that used to be, at least the base used to be somewhat dovish. Now they're wringing their hands because peace may be breaking out, right, between the U.S. and Russia. And it's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Well, Dan, one thing that go ahead.
Oh, go ahead,
Robbie. No, go ahead, Robbie. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, Dan, it's the first time I ever got a chance to meet you. And as the right winger here on the show, I've got to say, I fully support this. I do not see a downside. And I got to wonder, the Republicans are going to fight this. They just are. I got to wonder, though, where will the so-called progressive Democrats fall on this? Will the squad, will the more so-called, will he get Democratic support to actually help him do one of the things that they said they want to do? Will they actually have to put their cards on the table and actually say, yes, I am with you, let's do this? Or you think they'll punt?
Yeah, I certainly hope they will, but I also would not be surprised if they push back on it because it's Trump. It's they care if it's the messenger, who the messenger is that's doing it. When Biden commits genocide, it's fine, and when Trump, threatens genocide or ethnic cleansing, it's bad. It's the bipartisan system is that way, and it's terrible because people seem to have no principles, right? They only care if it's good for their party, or if their party's doing it, it's fine, and if the other party's not doing it. So in any case, we'll see. I share your skepticism. I do wonder whether they will go along with it, even though they say this is what they care about, but that they could oppose it just to gain political,
If they oppose it, do you think that their voters would punish them in the midterms?
Well, that's a great question. I think sadly, again, I think what you've seen in the U.S. is a shift where, the liberals used to be more opposed to military spending, and the conservatives were more supportive of it. Now that seems to have flipped.
Yep.
So I'm not sure the liberal base will care one way or another. Again, I'm seeing in my social media feed, my liberal friends seem more worried, again, that we may have peace with Russia than they are about other things. It's absolutely bizarre to me.
As a right winger, that breaks my brain. I cannot understand that. I don't understand it.
Well, they're calling it Trump derangement syndrome. And I think that is a real thing. I think it's basically anything Trump wants, they see as bad. And of course, I like the expression a broken clock is right twice a day. Whether you like Trump
or a military clock is broken military clock is right once a day.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, good point. The fact that Trump is the messenger of this doesn't change my view that it's good, right? And so I think people have to stand by their principles and support Trump where he does something good and oppose him where he does something bad. That sounds so simple, but it doesn't seem simple for people. There is this.
No, it's not simple at all. It's teen politics. I'm loyal to a set of policies and ideologies. And if those policies and ideologies started to be represented by a party that I previously hadn't voted for, I would start voting for them. I don't think other people are like that. We're in the middle, to put it really simply, right? The Democratic and Republican parties kind of switched places on a lot of issues between 1924 and then 1932 when FDR was elected president. And it seems to me like on foreign policy, we are again, involved right now in the middle of a dramatic political realignment between the two major parties, where the Democratic Party is more bellicose and militaristic and interventionist, not just in proxy wars like the Russo-Ukrainian conflict, but all sorts of things. And I could actually see next year in the midterms Democrats running and saying, Trump is making us less safe, like running hawkish commercials about him cutting the defense budget and making us vulnerable to attack. The kind of ads that, like, say, a Reagan would have run, or a Bush the second would have run. It is kind of head spinning to see this. I mean, who would have, Dan, if someone had come to you 20 years ago and said, a president of the United States is going to propose major defense budget cuts in the double digits in a huge way, and be serious about it and order it like from within a month of taking office, which party would you have predicted it to be?
Yeah, no, you would have said the Democratic Party, and you would have, no, obviously that's what you would have guessed. And as you say, there's a major realignment that's happening. And the other big realignment, truthfully, is that the Democrats, which have, I think, they earned their position as the party of the working class after FDR. They've lost the working class, and they hate the working class, and now they run on social issues, basically. And you see what it's gotten them. I mean, they're losing bigly, as Trump would say, over it. But they have such disdain for the working class now, the working class that was their base. And now, Trump has gained that largely. Now, I'm not saying Trump's necessarily going to deliver for them. I think, that's not clear to me at all. He's pretty much scrapping the National Labor Relations Board, which is barely functioning at the moment. I think union rights will greatly be threatened under him. But the workers feel more that he speaks for them more than the Democratic Party. And I think, at least in style, he certainly does, right? He, this thing where he flew Air Force One over the Daytona 500. I mean, honestly, that's brilliant stuff. You got to tip your hat to the guy. Like, hey, Kamala done something like that, or Biden, they would have won the election, but they didn't have it in their hearts to do it because they really don't like workers. And, it's not just the Democratic Party, it's also their base and their kind of celebrity spokespeople. You might have seen the SNL skit where over the weekend where Tom Hanks plays a MAGA guy. He's got a MAGA hat and all, and he's on like a Jeopardy-like show, and he's an overt racist. And it's just like they hate the American working class. So it's an interesting time. And I think as an activist, as a left-wing activist, it's a hard time to decide how you do your work, because it's very complicated, and it's going to be very hard, I think, to get liberals on board again with the good things that Trump wants to do.
Well,
I wonder.
Aren't we?
Oh, go ahead.
Let's talk about an old 1960s word, co-option, right? So in radical circles in the left, there was always a concern in the 60s that like their issues could be co-opted by maybe the Democratic Party, by traditional liberals, or by or even by the right. A great example of co-option would have been Bill Clinton co-opted a lot of Republican ideas like the crime bill, welfare reform, NAFTA, and these were it took a lot of it didn't get him new supporters, but it sucked a lot of the air out of the tires of the GOP in the 90s. Now, what Trump is doing is like a rabid honey badger. He's got a million things going on, and some of them are obvious attempts to co-opt left-wing ideas. Slashing the Pentagon is one of them. I don't even know if this is something he's thought through that way. It just has that effect. ending the war in Ukraine should be, those are left-wing politics. That's, ending wars is left-wing politics, or it's supposed to be. And so when you're in danger of being co-opted, as the left and like liberal Democrats are, you have a choice, right? You can either say, we're gonna like not let this happen and we're gonna scurry to the left of the co-opter's position and recapture that, or you can cede it completely and say, we've lost that, we can't get it from them, they own that now, so we will have to focus on other issues. It seems to me like Democrats particularly have no interest in trying to become a pacifist or an anti-militarist party ever again in the near future, and they're ceding that to the right, and so this doesn't leave traditional liberals with a lot to work with.
Yeah, although, I think there's going to be those issues out there where, again, people who are in the peace movement will still, we're not going out of business yet. I think, the Palestinian issue is still there. Of course, Trump's statement that he's, wants to, throw all the Palestinians out of Gaza and build a resort there. I don't know if he's serious about that, but obviously that, if he goes in that direction, that's something for people to, demonstrate against. I think the attempts to overthrow other governments like Venezuela and Cuba, that's there. And again, it's a matter of just sticking to your principles, and you oppose things again that are there. But hey, if I don't have to oppose the war in Ukraine anymore, okay, that's one less thing that I have to do. That's great. I mean, I have been spending the last 3 years very focused on Russia and Ukraine. I've been to Russia 5 times in the last 2 years. I've been to the Donbass 4 times in that period. I've been to Crimea, and I've been doing that to do citizen diplomacy because I wanted to end this war in Russia, wanted to build peaceful relations with Russia. If that's going to happen, great. I'll just reorient myself, So, and that's what people have to do, I think. You just stick to your guns, whatever they are. And, but it's interesting, I think in the end, you'll find interesting allies. And I'm fine with that. I'll just tell you a little anecdote. I think my parents are a great bellwether. Like I check in with my parents on where the right is at. They're very into Trump, and but they're also, like, my mom really likes Putin and likes Russia. She calls Putin Pooty, So this is very interesting to me, So where my parents and I, because I've always been the left-wing black sheep in the family, whereas we used to disagree on those issues, we actually agree on those particular issues, on Russia and stuff. And I don't have a problem with that. Like, okay, that's something we don't have to disagree about. So I just think people need to be creative too. And I hope, look, here's what I hope, and I don't know if this will happen, and I guess I'll ask you two what you think. I hope if Trump doesn't follow through with his promises to ratchet down the military-industrial complex, I'd like to see the MAGA people protest, because that's what they seem to have voted for, and I hope they're willing to do that. I hope they're willing to take on their guy. In a way, the Democrats were not willing to take on their people. We're not willing to take on Obama, even though he deported more people than Trump did, and didn't take on Obama for the war in Libya and the coup in Ukraine and all that, right? And I hope the MAGA people are ready to fight if Trump doesn't follow through again with those good things like demilitarization.
I've got some good news for you. I think that they will, because that's me. I'm one of those MAGA people. I'm not a Trump supporter. Trump lost me when he came out with support of red flag laws. When he said, you'll take the guns first, do due process second. Sorry, you can't take someone's property without a trial. You got to commit a crime first. And he just kind of went kind of crazy in that.
Although not necessarily, if you look at asset forfeiture.
Well, that's true. And that's one of the things I'd like to see him do. But I think that what Trump is probably doing with this whole Pentagon cut And I want to get y'all's feedback on this, because this is what I think this is where he's going. Migration and illegal immigration are his big things, and mine too. I wonder if he took the time to think about what is it that's causing this in the first place, and a leading cause of it is war.
Yes.
So maybe Trump is thinking about, maybe in addition to deporting the migrants already here, maybe we should stop blowing the crap out of the countries where they live and actually help
just
them
overthrowing their governments, right?
I mean,
Obama
maybe
participated in the overthrow of the government of the democratically elected president of Honduras, and
look at Libya.
Broke loose there after that happened.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so I wonder if that's where Trump is looking at this. Maybe he's not even trying to court the peace movement at all. Maybe he's looking at this as a way, if I'm going to stop migration, we got to let people actually have a chance to build up the places where they live, and let them have agency where they live so they can develop their own countries. Maybe that's where this is coming from. What do y'all think?
Well, I mean, look, first of all, I don't know if that's where he's coming from, but it is where he should be coming from. You and I agree that is the first place to start, is to allow these countries to live, to be sovereign, to go their own paths, whatever that might be. And there's no question that we have more refugees in the world today than in all of human history, and it's because of these wars.
Yeah,
these crazy wars. You mentioned Libya. That's what really caused major immigration into Europe. And Europe is wringing its hands about that, but they supported it. NATO, that was a NATO operation. And same thing with Syria. Syria has 7 million refugees. Of course, Ukraine has millions. And again, I think that Biden provoked that war. So, I mean, you don't have to be a genius to see that, if you end the wars and you don't trash others' economies, by the way, with sanctions, another big issue. Right now, a third of the world's population are under U.S. sanctions, which devastate these countries. If you stop that and you basically leave these other countries alone and worry about your own problems, you're going to have a lot less immigration. So
I just kind of thought about that. I'm just thinking about, why would he go and pick a fight with the Republicans? Because let's be honest, that's what he's doing. And that's the only thing I can think of, is either one, he's looking at this from a businessman. Stability is good for business. And so maybe stability means that you don't go around and blow everybody up. And maybe he's looking around saying, no, maybe we are the ones turning into a crap hole country, to use a famous Trump quote. Like, why can't we have high-speed rail from the middle of Montana, where I am, to New York City, where Ted is?
No good reason.
Why do not have infrastructure? Why are our schools crappy? Why can't we actually put America first for once? Maybe that's where he is.
I agree. I think that's probably where he is. I want to pip a little bit to something that came up.
That's what Jimmy Carter told Trump. They had a conversation about China. You probably know this. Jimmy Carter said, "Hey, China has speed trains, and it's because they haven't been at war since 1979."
Yeah, and even then, just barely.
Yeah, and he said, "Where are your speed trains?"
Yeah,
I mean,
and by the way, China's trains they're not just high-speed rail, right? They have a train that goes to Tibet. It has to go up to 10,000 feet in elevation above sea level. It has to be pressurized like an airplane. That's incredible.
And they have trains that now go faster than an airplane, speed-wise. Oh, it's incredible what they're doing. And, when I was a kid in China, they were all riding bicycles.
Oh, yeah. I was there in 1997 the first time, not long ago. And everyone there were almost no cars in Beijing. Yeah. Everyone was on bicycles.
It's got to be the greatest development in human history, and we begrudge them for that. But, hey, again,
they're kicking our ass 6 ways till
Sunday. And I'd like to get me some of those speed trains,
Well, so I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to pivot over to China. The proposal that Trump made a week ago, Blinken, you missed it, but he said he wants to meet with President Xi and Putin in order to talk about these major military reductions. Cynical anti-Trumpists have been saying, well, that's ridiculous. Why would they agree to that? Why would we unilaterally disarm? I mean, my take is the U.S. we spend so much more than either of these two countries that they're just trying to catch up to us. It's an arms race that we're constantly leading and have been, going back to the Soviet period and the Cold War and all that. I think they would welcome this. I think they're going to be like all over it like white on rice. What do you think?
Well, I totally agree. I mean, I think both countries, they realize that every dollar that goes out the window to the military is the dollar they can't spend on development and on their own people. And yes, I think they would love to take that pressure off themselves of having to, as you say, not even stay up with us, because that's nearly impossible, but even to come close to any sort of parity. Yes, they would welcome it. And again, the American people have to welcome it. We can't go on like this, and the economy is I think on the verge of collapse. I mean, you cannot be $30+ trillion in debt and think you can continue to just print your way out of it. And that's what we've been doing. We've just been printing money.
We sure have.
And thinking that we could do that forever, and we cannot. That's impossible. And
let's talk about the economic implications, though. I want to be fair here. We do have they call it a military industrial complex for a reason. If we have a dramatic, cut like this is being suggested, although I think in reality we're not ending up, even if Trump gets his way, with a net 35% reduction. We're ending up with a net 35% reduction of what we currently are spending, plus the additional spending for his Iron Dome and other schemes, right? So we might even end up right where we are now. But let's just say we end up with a net reduction in military spending. Are we going to have some shockwaves, from defense contractors that are going to lose contracts, go out of business, unemployed defense workers, unemployed members of the military? Is that going to harm the U.S. economy as well?
Look, that's a possibility, though there's an easy way to deal with that. First of all, you retool. I mean, again, people in the military, you can stay in the military, but you're going to go to the Army Corps of Engineers. And when there's a big fire in Los Angeles, you're going to go there and you're going to put out the fires and you're going to build stuff. And Raytheon, hey, we're happy to do business with you, but you ain't going to be making missiles. We'd like you to start making some speed trains. We'd like this, I mean, we need to retool the economy and stop being a military.
Plowshares.
Yes, it can be done. It can be done. Obviously, it can be done.
So that's what the Romans did. I mean, the Roman armies, they're the ones who built the aqueducts and the roads. I mean, this is not new.
It's not new. And China does it. Again, we could learn a lot from what China's doing. So we need a change in priorities. And that's very, that's critical.
All right, Dan, thank you so much for joining us. It's always so great to see you. Let's hang out again soon. Dan Kovalik is an American human rights, labor rights lawyer, and a peace activist.
It's a pleasure meeting you.
Really nice to meet you.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Take care now. Bye-bye.
So yeah, he's so good.
I like him.
Yeah, he's good.
I've never talked to him before. Never seen him. So this is the first time for me.
Well, there he is. So I'm sure it won't be the last. So So anyway, let's wrap it up here. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. It's always fun. Please become a paid subscriber or a free subscriber, a follower, either on Rumble or Facebook. Please follow us on X Spaces. And just remember that this only becomes a viable show, only remains something that Manila and I and Robby can continue to do if you support it. And this is true, of course, not just about this show, but anything else like this in this format online. So if you see stuff you like, you got to pay for it. And otherwise it's just going to go away. And then it'll be like, in the old days of brick and mortar where you'd be like, God, I can't believe that store went under. And it's like, did you ever buy anything there? No. It's like, well, that's kind of what happens. So please click on the button right below the Rumble chat to help support the show. It's something you can only do when we're here right now on Rumble Live or during the rerun period, which Robby's going to put up in a little bit. So thanks again to Robby for filling in for Manila. Manila should be back tomorrow. Thanks for, of course, your support in moderating the chat. And please follow us, blah, blah, blah. Support independent news and content creators everywhere and anywhere you can.
Yep,
So
just real quick, just a quick reminder. We are going to try and do our first premium show next week on our locals channel. So if you're here on Rumble, up under where you're watching the video, there's a red join button. It's $5 a month. And you can join that anytime. It's not like being a paid subscriber, but that's where the premium content will be. If this thing goes off next week, like I'm hoping, you will have clips. But to see the entire thing, though, you got to join our locals channel, and you can do that at any time.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for that plug. Thanks, everyone, for listening. See you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks, Robby.
Bye-bye, y'all.
See you soon.